Lauren Mitchell's manicured fingers tore straight through Amara Davis's first-class boarding pass. The rip loud enough to hush the entire cabin. Her voice followed, smooth and poisonous. "Nice try, but this ticket is fake." For a heartbeat. No one breathed. Then Ethan Hayes, his navy blazer still crisp from crew briefing, leaned across the aisle and barked, "Economy's back there, ma'am," as though the word ma'am were an insult. Amara, dressed for comfort in a soft oatmeal sweater, dark jeans, and sneakers, felt her 11-year-old daughter Zoe grip her hand. Zoe had been chattering moments earlier about Swiss chocolate and snow-capped peaks, but now her eyes shimmered with confusion. Amara inhaled slowly, the way she had learned during 1,000 boardroom battles, and said, "Please scan the code on that pass." Lauren ignored the request, turned to the man in seat 1D, and accepted a folded bill with a grateful nod. Charles Warner had slipped her 2 crisp hundreds, a private bounty to remove the mother and child he deemed unworthy of Zurich's elite row, over the intercom. Captain Robert Klein's measured drawl floated back from the cockpit. "Cabin crew, resolve any seating irregularities promptly." Translation. Amara understood. "Handle it before I have to." The captain never bothered to verify what the irregularity was. Zoe's voice quavered, soft but certain. "Mom, we belong here, right?" Amara squeezed her daughter's fingers. "Absolutely," she replied, meeting Lauren's stare without blinking. Seats 2A and 2B gleamed a foot away, waiting for them. Elena Torres, a frequent flyer in 2C, leaned into the aisle and said, "They just sat down. What's the problem?" But Ethan shot her a warning glance. Jamal Carter, a tech consultant in 3A, tilted his phone to record. He whispered to Elena, "Got a feeling this will go viral." Lauren snapped her fingers at Daniel Pierce, the bulky security officer stationed near the galley, and hissed, "Remove these 2 for attempting to board with forged documents." The accusation hung in the air like turbulence no one expected. Amara kept her tone even, each syllable spaced for anyone listening. "Those passes came directly from your airline's own app. Run them through the scanner." She would not turn this into a scene. Not yet. Because evidence gathered in real time was more powerful than any after-the-fact apology. She had boarded incognito precisely to test reports of discrimination, unaware that her investigation would unfold this quickly. Daniel placed a heavy hand on her elbow. "Ma'am, step aside." The passengers around them shifted, some pretending not to notice, others whispering, "What if it were us?" Zoe clutched her sketchbook to her chest. Lauren held up the torn ticket halves with theatrical flair, announced, "Counterfeit," and let the pieces flutter to the carpet. Amara's heart hammered, not with fear but with calculation. She could end this in one phone call. Mia Jackson, her executive assistant, was on standby. But first she needed to know exactly how far the crew would go. She turned slightly toward the aisle camera, ensuring her face, Lauren's sneer, and the shredded pass were all in frame. "Will you at least scan my daughter's?" she asked. Ethan plucked Zoe's pass, gave it a perfunctory glance, and tore it as well. Zoe gasped. The sound sliced through Amara's composure for a second, stirring memories of investors years earlier who had told her, "Come back when you have a white male co-founder." That sting had become fuel. Today it reignited. Amara straightened, spoke firmly yet quietly. "You're making a mistake that will cost more than you imagine." Charles smirked, settling deeper into his leather seat, confident his cash had purchased silence. Elena's patience snapped. "This is outrageous," she said. Rising halfway, Jamal followed, phone held high. "The world's watching. Folks," Ethan barked, "phones down." No one complied. Danielle Pierce's grip tightened. Zoe whispered, "Mom, I just want to see the Alps." The words pierced Amara's resolve. Her vacation promise to Zoe was not a luxury, but a bond. She met her daughter's eyes, brown mirrors of her own, and thought, "Hold on, baby. We'll get there." Lauren's tone turned icy. "You don't belong in first class, and the captain trusts me." Amara studied the attendant's nameplate, committing every detail to memory. "Your uniform should stand for safety and service," she said, voice warm yet unyielding. "Instead, you're turning it into a costume for cruelty." A rustle spread through the cabin as passengers processed that line. Simple, calm, devastating. Ethan attempted one last push. "Stop resisting or I'll call Port Authority." Jamal filmed him point blank. Daniel spoke into his radio, but hesitation crept into his baritone. The optics were shifting, and he felt it. Amara extended her phone, screen illuminated with the boarding record still visible in the Airline app. "Scan it," she paused, letting the tiny word linger. "Please." Lauren refused to look. Zoe's small hand shook, but she raised her chin. Elena murmured, "Hang in there, sweetheart." The cabin air seemed to thicken. Even the hum of the auxiliary power unit felt louder. Tense. Ethan's gaze flicked to Charles. The passenger gave a subtle nod, as if to say, "Keep going." Amara caught the exchange. Daniel exhaled, uncertain. Policies flickered through his head. Customer is always right unless threatening safety. But where was the threat? Amara's calm unsettled him. She returned her phone to her pocket and spoke just loudly enough for row 3 to catch. "Zoe, remember what I told you about courage? Sometimes it means standing still while others unravel." Zoe swallowed, nodded. The girl's composure shamed the adults. Lauren glanced around. Support wasn't coming. Robert's voice drifted from the cockpit again, less confident. "Cabin crew, status?" She thumbed her interphone. "We have 2 fraudulent passengers refusing relocation." Amara felt the final click of her internal timer. Enough evidence. She looked down at the torn tickets, then at Daniel, and finally at Lauren. "Document every second," she murmured to Jamal. "Truth travels faster than planes." For the first time, Ethan's voice cracked. "Let's just reseat them in economy and avoid delays." But Lauren, pride wounded, spat. "They can wait in the terminal for standby." Amara smiled, small and surprising. She reached for Zoe's hand, pressed a gentle kiss on her daughter's knuckles, then straightened and spoke to the entire cabin. Her words flowed evenly, punctuated for anyone listening through earbuds or assistive speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Amara Davis. I am a paying passenger, traveling with my daughter, holding legitimate first-class tickets. We have been publicly defamed and unlawfully denied our seats." She paused, breath caught across the rows. "If any crew member believes otherwise, present proof. If not, please step aside so my child may sit." Silence. Then a low murmur of agreement. Elena nodded vigorously. Jamal announced, "This is all on record." Charles shifted, money suddenly powerless. Lauren hesitated, eyes darting to Ethan, to Daniel, toward the cockpit. No one moved. In that hush. Amara's phone vibrated. Mia's name on the screen. Amara answered softly. "Mia, begin the clock." She ended the call and slid the device into her pocket. 15 minutes. That was all the time the crew had left, before she guided Zoe toward their seats. Amara crouched to gather the shredded passes, folding the halves together as though piecing back respect itself. She held Zoe's gaze. "We belong everywhere our integrity carries us," she said, voice low, steady. "Remember that?" Then mother and daughter stepped forward. 2 leather seats waited. But the real journey, the one that would shake an airline, rewrite policies, and prove a promise, had only just begun. The cabin was still tense from the ticket debacle when Lauren returned, this time with her arms crossed tight and her chin lifted like she was auditioning for power. She stood in the aisle beside Amara and Zoe, her voice sharper now. "You've disrupted boarding. Either move or be removed." Amara stayed seated, calm as ever, one arm around Zoe's shoulder. "You destroyed our boarding passes without verification," she replied evenly. "And now you're doubling down?" Lauren didn't answer, because just then Ethan burst back into the cabin, voice pitched high with faux outrage. "They stole Charles's wallet!" His words cracked like a whip across the rows. Gasps rippled from several passengers. Zoe stiffened. Amara's expression barely changed, but her jaw locked. Ethan pointed directly at Amara, then to her bag tucked beneath seat 2A. "Check her purse. Charles says he saw her take it." Amara turned to Zoe, who looked more confused than ever. "Mom, what's happening?" the girl whispered. "It's not true," Amara murmured back. "Stay calm." She turned to the crew. "If there's a missing item, check the cameras, check the cabin, but don't you dare accuse my child or me without proof." Lauren looked past Amara toward the cockpit, waiting for a signal. It came. Captain Roberts' voice slid through the intercom like ice. "Security. Verify the claim immediately." Daniel Pierce stepped forward, this time with one hand already on his belt, ready to escalate. "We need to search your belongings." Amara stood now. Her voice didn't rise, but it carried across the first-class cabin. "On what grounds? You already tore up our tickets. Now a passenger, who bribed your crew, is accusing us of theft, and instead of questioning him, you're treating us like criminals?" She turned slightly, ensuring the overhead camera had her in frame again. "This isn't about a wallet. It's about bias. It's about appearance. It's about Charles Warner deciding my daughter and I don't look like we belong here." A few rows back, Elena Torres leaned into the aisle, eyebrows furrowed. "This is getting out of control. I watched them sit down. No one took anything." Jamal stood again. "You're gonna strip search them based on a rumor?" Just as Daniel took a step forward, a new voice chimed in, soft but confident. "Excuse me." It was Sophie Nguyen, the youngest of the flight attendants, clearly nervous, but her conscience was louder than her fear. She stepped beside Elena and said, "I just came from the galley. Charles has his wallet. It's in his coat pocket." Silence. Then Jamal, louder. "Say that again," Sophie repeated, firmer this time. "He never lost it. I saw him checking his coat just now. Ethan lied." The color drained from Ethan's face, but he pushed back. "She doesn't know what she saw. Charles said it was gone." But now everyone was watching. Elena, Jamal, half the cabin, even a woman across the aisle who had stayed quiet until now, quietly filming the entire ordeal on her phone. Amara looked at Ethan, her voice smooth but brimming with authority. "You're trying to remove us with a false accusation. That's slander." Daniel hesitated. "Ma'am, we still need to confirm." "Then confirm," Amara snapped. "But do it properly, not through lies and theatrics." Zoe, her voice barely audible, whispered, "I didn't do anything. Mom, I didn't even move." Amara leaned down, brushing hair from her daughter's forehead. "I know, and they'll know too." Jamal stepped into the aisle, blocking Daniel's path. "You're not searching anyone until you check Charles's coat." The tension hit a breaking point. Passengers began murmuring louder. "This ain't right," one man muttered. "Why don't they ask Charles?" another said. But the man in question, Charles Warner, stayed seated, eyes down, hands clenched in his lap. Guilty silence. Lauren tried to seize control. "Let's all calm down. We'll sort this once we're airborne." But Elena wasn't having it. "No, You already ripped their tickets and accused them of theft. You don't get to act like this is routine. Sophie, now emboldened, stepped closer to Amara. I'm sorry. I didn't know what was going on when I walked up earlier. But what Ethan said, that you took the wallet, isn't true. Amara met her eyes. Thank you. Your courage matters. The intercom chimed again. Robert's voice, this time less certain. Security, do a full sweep before takeoff. Confirm the claim. Daniel, unsure now, walked briskly toward the coat closet. Seconds later, he returned holding the wallet. Found it. Still there. Nothing's missing. The breath left the cabin like air sucked from a balloon. Amara turned back to Ethan, who suddenly couldn't meet her gaze. You accused a mother and her child of theft to help Charles feel more comfortable. Ethan opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Jamal, filming the whole time, said, You might want to stop digging. You're already buried, Elena added. The fact that this crew believed him, without question, says everything. Amara exhaled, slow and steady. I've stayed quiet long enough. You've crossed too many lines. And believe me, your actions today won't disappear when this flight takes off. Zoe, still curled close to her side, whispered, Can we still go to Switzerland? Amara kissed the top of her head. Yes, baby. We're going. I promise. Lauren tried to regain composure. We just acted on the information we had. Amara didn't flinch. No, you acted on prejudice, on assumption. You followed a passenger's money and ignored your own protocol. She turned again, facing the rows of watching travelers. This isn't just about us anymore. It's about how many families you've done this to and gotten away with it. Elena nodded. We've all seen it. But today it stops. The cabin had changed. It wasn't quiet submission anymore. It was alert, charged, and watching. Jamal looked at Sophie. You might be the only one here who did the right thing. Sophie blushed but stood taller. Someone had to say something. Amara pulled out her phone. Her thumb hovered over a contact. She wasn't calling Mia yet, not until she knew what else this crew might try. But now, she had everything she needed: bias, a bribe, a false theft report, evidence, witnesses, and above all, dignity, still intact, unshaken. She tucked the phone away, turned to Zoe, and whispered gently, We're not done yet. The truth was unfolding seat by seat, and Amara Davis had just begun her quiet revolution, just when the cabin seemed like it might exhale. Sophie reappeared, this time holding a digital tablet, her face pale and tight. She paused beside Amara, tilted the screen toward her, and whispered so only a few could hear. You've been marked as unruly in the manifest. Amara blinked once, lips parting slightly. Marked? Sophie nodded, swallowing hard. The captain flagged your name manually. I saw the entry. It was added less than 10 minutes ago. Amara straightened, her mind already spinning through the implications. Robert Klein had gone beyond ignoring protocol. He'd falsified a record that could get her banned from future international travel, flagged by customs, or worse, removed under federal aviation policy. Lauren caught the exchange and, sensing a shift, raised her voice to the cabin. These two have been identified as a security concern. We're under protocol to have them removed immediately. Ethan, feeding off the declaration, added with a smirk. This flight won't depart until they're out of the cabin. Charles Warner leaned back in his seat, folding his arms, pleased. Finally, he muttered under his breath, but Sophie didn't stay silent this time. Captain Robert added that flag after they were seated, after the tickets were torn. That's not protocol, it's retaliation. Elena stood up again, this time full height, voice firm. You can't falsify flight records just because you don't like who's in the seat. That's not how this works, Jamal chimed in, loud enough for everyone. If they were really a threat, security would have removed them at the gate, not mid-boarding after a fake wallet story. The passengers stirred uneasily. A man in row 4 leaned forward and asked, "Wait, did the pilot actually tamper with the manifest?" Amara didn't raise her voice, but her words struck hard. "I asked you to verify the ticket. You tore it. I asked you to prove the theft. You found the wallet. Now you fabricate a safety risk? What happens next? Do you claim we're smuggling something? That my daughter is carrying explosives in her backpack?" Zoe flinched at the word, and Amara immediately wrapped an arm around her. "I won't let you turn her into a threat just because she doesn't look like your version of a first-class passenger," Daniel Pierce, who had up to this point followed orders with robotic detachment, now hesitated near the aisle. "Captain says she's a threat," he muttered, almost to himself, but his stance faltered. Amara took one step forward. "Then let the captain come out of the cockpit and say it to my face." Silence. The cockpit door stayed closed. Robert's voice buzzed through the intercom again, colder this time. "Cabin crew, remove the flagged passengers. Follow protocol." But the spell had broken. Sophie turned toward the others. "There's no protocol that says we ignore proof, ignore real-time footage, ignore passengers and just obey bias. We're supposed to serve, not destroy reputations." Lauren's face flushed, her eyes darting toward Charles, as if looking for rescue. But he stayed seated, smug but silent. Ethan doubled down. "This is delaying departure. We need them gone," Elena snapped. "You need to sit down and shut up." Gasps followed, then a ripple of quiet cheers. Jamal walked to Daniel's side, holding his phone high. "You're being recorded. All of this manifest thing. That's federal. You sure you want your name attached to it?" Daniel blinked slowly, the weight of liability finally creeping in. Sophie tapped the screen again and showed it to Elena and Jamal. "It was changed at 11:52. That's 7 minutes after she boarded. I can testify. So can the time logs." Amara spoke now, voice razor sharp. "What you've done isn't just wrong. It's illegal. You've tampered with airline records to justify discrimination." She turned to face the rows of passengers behind her. "Let me ask all of you something. If I had been white, in a business suit, with a briefcase instead of a backpack and a daughter with blonde curls instead of braids, would you have torn my ticket? Would you have said I was a threat? Would you have believed Charles?" No one spoke, but no one looked away. Not anymore. Lauren tried one final tactic. "You're escalating the situation. Ms. Davis," Amara snapped. "Amara Davis." The name didn't register yet. That would come later. For now. It hung in the air like a quiet countdown, Jamal said. "That manifest change? It needs to be reported," Elena added, "and every single person involved held accountable." Then came the chant, low at first, then louder. A woman in row 5 started it. "Let them fly!" A man in row 6 echoed, "Let them fly!" Soon, the whole cabin was saying it, like thunder through the aisles. Daniel looked at Lauren, she looked at Ethan, and for the first time, they looked scared. Sophie stepped between them and Amara. "You can't fake protocol to silence passengers, not anymore. We all see it now." Amara turned to Zoe and whispered, "We're almost through." Over the speaker, Robert's voice cracked, a rare thing from a captain. "Crew, please, manage the situation before I call airport command." Amara faced forward. "Do it. Call them. Because when they get here, I'll show them everything. The footage, the torn passes, the altered manifest, and the bribe your crew accepted." Her voice softened only for Zoe. "We're going to Switzerland, sweetheart. I promise." Lauren started to protest again. But Ethan's voice cut in first, flat, almost panicked. "Charles gave us cash to clear the seats." The cabin went quiet. Charles sat up suddenly. "You weren't supposed to say that," he hissed. Lauren stared at Ethan, mouth open. "What are you doing?" He shrugged. "I'm not losing my job over this." Amara stared at him for a long moment. "You already did." And with that, she pulled out her phone and pressed the screen. One ring, two. Then Mia Jackson's calm voice answered. "Ready?" Amara looked toward the front of the cabin and said clearly, "It's time. Bring in Samuel." She ended the call and returned the phone to her pocket. The passengers murmured again, this time not with suspicion, but with curiosity. Who was Amara Davis really? Zoe gripped her mother's hand, her voice steadier than before. "Do we get to go now?" Amara kissed her forehead and nodded. "Yes, baby. But first, they go." The cabin wasn't just watching anymore. It was waiting. Something bigger than seats and tickets had shifted. A reckoning was about to walk down that aisle. The moment Ethan admitted Charles had bribed them, the cabin seemed to reel in collective disbelief. But before any resolution could take root, Lauren twisted the story once again. "I just noticed a safety issue," she announced loudly, grabbing onto the closest excuse with practiced authority. "This child's seatbelt was tampered with. That's a serious violation." Amara's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" she asked, rising to her feet. "My daughter has been sitting here this entire time. No one touched her belt." But Lauren was already gesturing to Daniel. "She's a threat, interfering with onboard safety." Ethan jumped on the lie like it was his last lifeline. "I saw her loosen the child's belt." The air shifted sharply as Daniel approached Amara, posture tense, reaching out again. "Ma'am, I have no choice but to detain you for a safety inspection." Zoe's eyes filled with panic as she cried out, "No, Mom, I didn't do anything." Amara turned, shielding her daughter with her body. "Don't you lay a hand on her," she warned. "This is a lie, and you know it." Elena stood up from her seat and called out, "I've been watching the entire time. No one touched that belt except Lauren. I saw her lean in while pretending to adjust the tray table." Jamal moved into the aisle once again, blocking Daniel's path with his arms wide. "You're not detaining anyone. You've already framed them with a fake theft, tore up their real tickets, changed the manifest, and now this?" His voice boomed. "You're staging a threat now? Really?" Several passengers murmured in agreement, and phones lifted again into recording mode. That's when Sophie stepped forward, eyes filled with quiet fury. "Lauren loosened that belt," she said. "I watched her do it 5 minutes ago while pretending to check on Zoe. It was deliberate." Lauren's face drained of color. "That's a lie," she snapped, voice cracking. Sophie didn't flinch. "No, it's the truth. You set her up, just like you helped Ethan set them up for theft, just like the manifest tampering. It's all falling apart now, and you're scrambling." The words hung in the cabin like smoke. Daniel's hand dropped away from his radio. Passengers shifted uncomfortably, many of them no longer confused, but angry. Charles, still seated, muttered, "She's not crew. She's a threat. Get them out before this turns worse." But no one moved, not even Ethan. Amara stood tall, her hand resting lightly on Zoe's shoulder. "You're desperate," she said to Lauren. "You've run out of lies. So now you endanger a child to cover your own collapse." Her voice never wavered, but the emotion crept in, steady and devastating. "You're not just wrong. You're dangerous." Robert's voice crackled over the intercom again, now laced with frustration. "Cabin crew, control the situation or we delay departure indefinitely." But this time, there was no movement from Lauren or Ethan. Even Daniel was frozen, eyes darting from Sophie to the passengers to the child now crying softly in her mother's arms. Jamal turned to the rest of the cabin. This is beyond personal bias. This is criminal now. You tamper with a child's safety equipment. You don't belong on this aircraft. Period, Elena added. I've filed complaints before. Nothing was ever done. But now people are watching. Now we have witnesses. Phones were still recording. A man 3 rows back shouted, "You're gonna be on the news tonight, Lauren." Amara raised her phone slowly, tapped a few buttons, and brought it to her ear. "Mia, we have a full safety fabrication now. Yes, Zoe's seatbelt. I want the board informed immediately." She paused, eyes still locked on Lauren, then added, "Also, contact airport security. I'm not waiting for the captain to play cleanup." Sophie turned to face Amara directly. "I've already documented everything. I'll testify. I've had enough of this. The moment you sat down, they treated you like you were trespassing, not traveling. This isn't a flight. It's a setup." Amara nodded. "That's exactly what it is. And it ends today." She crouched beside Zoe, who was holding back tears. "Baby, we're okay. No one's going to hurt you. Not while I'm here." Then she stood again and addressed the entire cabin. "Everyone watching, this is how injustice hides. Behind uniforms, behind calm voices, behind the word protocol. But this is not protocol. This is profiling. This is abuse." Lauren tried to interrupt, but Amara raised a single hand. "No, you've said enough. Every lie, every threat, every attempt to humiliate us. It's all been seen and heard. Now it's your turn to be held accountable." Daniel finally stepped back, placing his hands behind his back as if surrendering his role. "I can't support this anymore," he mumbled. "This doesn't feel right." Jamal clapped once, sharply. "Then step aside and let this mother and her child go to Switzerland like they paid to do." Robert's voice came again, this time with rising urgency. "Flight crew, confirm readiness or report incident status to command." Amara turned toward the cockpit, speaking clearly for all to hear. "The incident is over. Your crew has fabricated a safety risk to remove me. The child's seatbelt was sabotaged. The theft accusation was false. The ticket destruction was unauthorized. And the manifest was altered to falsely mark me as a threat." She paused, letting every word land. "Your command will hear this recording, and so will the board." Then, quiet. For the first time in 15 minutes, Lauren said nothing. Her arms had dropped. Her smirk was gone. She looked cornered. Ethan leaned against the wall of the galley, eyes lowered. Even Charles looked uneasy now, unsure whether his money had bought silence or exposure. Amara turned to the passengers. "I want to thank each of you who spoke up, who stood, who recorded what happened here today. This isn't just about me. This is about every person who gets dismissed, demeaned, or destroyed because someone thinks they don't look the part." Elena wiped her eyes. "You stood your ground, and now they can't hide anymore." Jamal stepped back beside his seat. "You're not just flying. You're fighting for every one of us who's been treated like less." Zoe looked up at her mom and whispered, "Can we sit now?" Amara smiled, bent low, and kissed her forehead. "Yes, sweetheart. We're not going anywhere." She turned to the crew, what was left of them, and gave one final instruction. "Call your supervisor. Tell them the CEO is on board, and we're not moving until this gets handled right." And with that, she reached for her phone one last time. One call. That's all it would take. Because the next person to walk down that aisle would not be there to remove Amara. They'd be there to remove the ones who tried and failed to break her. The cabin door opened with a low mechanical hiss, and the hum of conversation fell into silence as a tall man in a charcoal suit stepped aboard, followed closely by a poised woman in a sleek navy dress. The man's badge read, "Regional Director," Pinnacle Airlines. The woman beside him carried a thin tablet and an unmistakable air of command. It was Mia Jackson, calm, focused, and unreadable. She walked directly to seat 2A and stood beside Amara without a word. Then Samuel Brooks, the regional director himself, lifted his voice just enough to carry over the first-class cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. I'm here on behalf of Pinnacle Airlines executive leadership. I'd like to formally acknowledge that Amara Davis, seated before you, is not only a paying first-class passenger on this flight to Zurich, but also the CEO and 25% shareholder of Pinnacle Airlines." A collective gasp swept across the rows. Heads turned, phones that had been filming out of curiosity now recorded out of awe. Charles Warner's face froze, the blood draining as he slowly sat upright. Lauren Mitchell's lips parted, her smug expression collapsing into stunned horror. Ethan Hayes let out a quiet, "Oh no," as if the reality had only just pierced his shield of denial. Even Daniel Pierce lowered his gaze, retreating one slow step toward the galley. Amara stood slowly, gently guiding Zoe out of her seat to stand beside her. "This is my daughter," she said softly, "and this was supposed to be our vacation. Instead, your crew turned it into a public humiliation, a string of lies, and a threat to our safety." She turned slightly toward Mia. "Let's begin." Mia tapped a few commands on her tablet, and her voice rang clear and deliberate. "Per CEO directive and board authorization, flight attendants Lauren Mitchell and Ethan Hayes, Captain Robert Klein, and Security Officer Daniel Pierce are hereby relieved of duty, effective immediately. All four will be escorted off this aircraft and suspended pending formal investigation for policy violations, manifest tampering, false safety reporting, racial profiling, and misconduct unbecoming of Pinnacle Airlines staff." The words hit like a wave. Lauren stumbled back against the cabin wall, whispering, "We didn't know. She didn't look like..." But Amara cut her off. "Like what? Like a CEO? Like someone who could afford first class? Like someone whose child belonged in a cabin of so-called elites?" Her voice never rose, but the air tightened with every word. "You didn't need to know who I was. You just needed to treat us with decency." Ethan looked toward Charles, desperate now. "He paid us. Charles gave us the money. He wanted them removed." Samuel stepped in. "And you accepted a bribe, falsified a theft report, and initiated a fabricated safety threat against a mother and her child. There is no defense for that." Lauren tried to interrupt again, her voice trembling. "That's not all. There were internal directives, subtle ones, from the higher-ups." But Mia held up a hand. "That will be addressed separately. Today is about what you chose to do." Jamal Carter, still seated but leaning forward, spoke up for everyone. "She didn't need a name tag for you to treat her right, but now that you know who she is, you're finally scared." Elena nodded beside him. "The only thing elite here today was her patience." Robert's voice crackled weakly from the intercom. "We were just trying to protect the flight." Amara raised her eyes toward the cockpit, her tone sharp. "You didn't protect anything. You endangered my daughter. And you gambled with the integrity of the airline I helped build." Mia's voice was even. "Captain Robert Klein, you are suspended as of this moment. Step out of the cockpit." When the door finally opened and Robert emerged, he looked like a man walking into a courtroom, not an airplane aisle. Daniel, stiff and silent, followed behind him. The four employees, once confident and commanding, now looked exposed, diminished. Zoe clung to her mother's hand. "Can we go to Switzerland now?" she asked softly. Amara smiled gently, brushing her daughter's braid over her shoulder. "Yes, baby. Now we can..." Applause broke out from row 5, then 6. Soon the entire cabin was clapping, many standing to show support. Amara turned, tears in her eyes, but none had fallen. Mia leaned in and said, "Catherine Lee and Richard Patel have approved every action. You'll get their written statements within the hour." Amara nodded. "Good. And I want a full review of every crew member on every international flight from JFK for the past 6 months. If this happened to us, it's happened to others." Sophie stepped forward, her voice steady. "I'll help. I want to testify. And I want to be trained properly, because I won't work for an airline that lets this happen in silence." Amara gave her a long look, then said, "We'll make sure that never happens again. And we'll start with you." Lauren looked to Mia one last time. "You're ruining our lives," Amara answered before Mia could. "No. You ruined your own the moment you decided you could buy dignity, destroy records, and lie without consequence. That era ends today." Charles, finally standing, tried to retreat down the aisle unnoticed, but passengers blocked his way. "Where are you going?" someone asked. "Stay and watch this." Jamal stood in his path. "No one forgets a man who uses money to humiliate families," Elena added. "You owe that child an apology." Charles tried to speak but gave up. He sat back down, face crimson, breathing heavily. Samuel addressed the cabin once more. "We understand the delay this has caused. For those who wish to continue this flight, we'll be replacing the crew immediately. Aisha Khan, Lucas Reed, and Maria Lopez are on standby and will be on board within minutes." Murmurs of approval followed. Amara turned to Mia. "Make sure every passenger receives a personal letter of apology, and make sure the names of every person who spoke up today are remembered, because that's what real leadership looks like." Mia nodded, already typing. Then came the final twist. Ethan, still shaken, looked down and confessed. "It wasn't just Charles. There's a memo from someone higher. I saw it last week. Said we're supposed to prioritize elite-facing image. Whatever that means. Charles wasn't acting alone." Jamal turned toward Mia. "That's the real story, isn't it?" Amara didn't flinch. "Then we investigate it. Mia, start digging. I want the truth on my desk by morning." Samuel turned toward Ethan, voice low. "You're still fired, but now you're also a witness." Passengers nodded slowly. The story they'd just witnessed was no longer about 2 passengers and a seat. It was about an entire system that had to answer for what it allowed. Zoe leaned into her mom and whispered, "You said it would stop." Amara kissed her forehead again. "And I meant it." The plane was quiet again, but not with fear, with respect, with awareness, and with the promise that something bigger had shifted. Because now, everyone on board knew exactly who Amara Davis was and what she stood for. The next morning, inside a glass-walled conference room overlooking Manhattan's skyline, the leadership of Pinnacle Airlines assembled without the usual pleasantries. The weight of what had unfolded the day before pressed heavily across the table. Amara Davis sat at the head, calm and composed, dressed in navy slacks and a crisp white blouse, her eyes locked on the internal reports scrolling across Mia Jackson's tablet. To her left sat Catherine Lee, vice chair of the board, her expression unreadable but focused. Beside her was Richard Patel, the airline's chief compliance officer, flipping through a printed dossier that listed every violation committed on Flight 482 to Zurich. At the far end sat Samuel Brooks, hands folded, having already briefed everyone on the firings of Lauren Mitchell, Ethan Hayes, Captain Robert Klein, and Daniel Pierce. Amara broke the silence first. "The public will expect accountability, but what I care about is fixing the culture that allowed this." Catherine nodded. "As of this morning, all 4 individuals have been officially terminated. Their access is revoked, and severance canceled under cause," Richard added. "We've also issued a preliminary apology to all passengers on the manifest. along with travel credits and a personal note from your office. Amara turned slightly to Mia. And the replacements? Mia replied. Aisha Khan, Lucas Reed, and Maria Lopez are in place. The Zurich flight took off this morning without issue. Passenger sentiment is already reversing. Our social team flagged a spike in praise. But that wasn't the end of it. Amara leaned back, tapping her pen against the edge of the table. What about the memo Ethan mentioned? Samuel glanced toward Richard. We pulled archived internal communications from 6 months ago. One stood out. A directive from a now-retired VP of Operations, Richard Calloway. It outlined elite passenger presentation standards. Mia raised her brow. Code for profiling. Richard nodded grimly. The memo instructed cabin crews to ensure the perceived standard of exclusivity remained intact. That included quietly repositioning passengers who didn't fit the image. Catherine looked stunned. And no one flagged this before? Amara shook her head slowly. It wasn't in the training manual. It was passed quietly through supervisory channels, just enough to influence behavior, not enough to create a paper trail. Jamal's footage and Sophie Nguyen's testimony were already being packaged for internal training. But this memo made it clear. The crew hadn't acted alone. They were emboldened by a toxic undercurrent. Amara stood. We don't just need training. We need a reset, new hiring standards, mandatory bias training, anonymous whistleblower reporting tools, and public transparency. Catherine agreed. This could be our turning point. Not just fixing what went wrong, but building something better. Mia then placed another document on the table. There's more. I found emails where lower-level supervisors tried to push back but were dismissed. One even warned that a high-level passenger might one day catch this on camera. The room was quiet again. Amara exhaled. And they were right. She looked to Samuel. We start the audit today. I want a report on every incident tagged as passenger misconduct in the last year. I want them re-reviewed with new eyes, Richard added, and a full rewrite of the cabin crew manual with board-approved language and legal sign-off. Catherine looked over the table, her voice lower now. This isn't just about a PR response. Amara, this is about trust. Amara nodded. Then let's earn it back. Not with marketing, with change. Outside the boardroom, a press statement was already being finalized. It would acknowledge the incident, the firings, and most importantly, the steps being taken to ensure no other family, black or otherwise, would be made to feel like intruders in a cabin they paid for. Amara's final instruction before leaving the room was simple. Get that memo to the legal team. Have every signature on it reviewed, and if anyone who backed that policy is still on payroll, terminate them by end of day. She paused at the door, looking back at the team. This wasn't just about me. It was about every passenger who was quiet because they were scared, or tired, or assumed no one would listen. Well, now they'll know we're listening, and we're acting. As she left the room, the silence that followed was no longer uncertain. It was driven. Because when a CEO walks into a boardroom not to save face, but to uproot the system itself, that's when real change begins. 3 months later, Amara Davis sat in the executive boardroom at Pinnacle Airline's headquarters, a cup of herbal tea cradled in her hands, sunlight spilling across the hardwood table as she looked out over the Manhattan skyline. The chaos of that June morning had faded, but its impact had not. She had kept her promise to Zoe. They had made it to Switzerland, Zermatt's snow-covered slopes, boat rides across Lake Zurich, and late-night conversations over hot chocolate. But this wasn't just about a vacation. It had always been about something deeper, about dignity, belonging, and what it meant to lead. Since the incident, Pinnacle Airlines had undergone a transformation. Catherine Lee and Richard Patel had overseen sweeping policy reforms, from bias awareness workshops for every staff level to the installation of anonymous reporting systems that allowed crew and passengers to submit discrimination complaints without fear. Amara had personally overseen the creation of a new hiring initiative focused on diversity, not just in race or gender, but in experience and empathy. "We don't just need qualifications," she told her staff in one of many training videos. "We need heart. We need people who understand that every passenger is someone's family." Sophie Nguyen had become one of the airline's rising stars, helping design the next wave of onboarding programs and even speaking on panels about ethical leadership. "What I saw that day changed me," she shared during a company-wide seminar, "because when you witness someone stand tall while being torn down, you remember it." Elena Torres and Jamal Carter were invited to speak at Pinnacle's quarterly summit. Jamal had turned his video footage into a short documentary. Now used in employee training, Elena had started an online support forum for travelers who had experienced bias in travel. "You're not crazy. You're not overreacting," she'd said. "Sometimes, the system is stacked against you, but people like Amara prove that it can be unstacked, one truth at a time." Amara's op-ed, titled "First Class Doesn't Equal First Human," had gone viral, published in major national papers and reshared by civil rights leaders and industry CEOs alike. "My daughter asked why people were being mean to us," Amara had written, "and I told her, some people fear what they don't understand. But that's not an excuse. That's a call to lead differently." Her words resonated far beyond aviation. Emails poured in from teachers, nurses, former pilots, even children who had seen the story play out through their parents' phones and asked questions no parent should have to answer. Mia Jackson, now Chief of Staff, stood proudly at Amara's side through every step. "You didn't just fire a few bad apples," she told her boss during one late evening meeting. "You pulled out the roots. That's the difference." But just when things seemed to settle, another twist emerged. A whistleblower from inside the airline's legacy archives came forward with years of ignored discrimination complaints, paper trails that had been quietly buried, emails that had gone unanswered, and incident logs that had been reclassified as customer misunderstanding. Amara ordered an emergency audit. Within a week, dozens of past complaints were reopened, and several former executives were placed under investigation. "No more silence," she declared in an internal broadcast. "No more sweeping it under the rug. If you knew and did nothing, you're just as responsible." Catherine and Richard backed her fully. "The cleanup doesn't stop at the cabin," Richard said. "It continues in every office, every system, every executive file." And with that, Pinnacle Airlines launched the Aviation Equity Initiative, a new arm of the company dedicated to setting industry-wide standards for anti-discrimination training, fair hiring, and passenger protections. On September 29th, Amara took the stage at a global aviation summit. She wasn't there to gloat or celebrate. She was there to redefine what leadership looked like. "You want to talk about turbulence?" she began, pausing for effect. "Try having your child watch you be accused, insulted, and threatened, all before takeoff. Then ask yourself if your airline's policies are really built for everyone, or just for some." Her speech brought the room to its feet. The applause wasn't just for what she'd endured, it was for the way she had turned it into purpose. Afterward, back in her office, Zoe sat curled on the couch, sketchbook in her lap. "Did they like your speech?" she asked. Amara smiled. "They did. But what matters more is that they heard it." She knelt beside her daughter. "I did all of this so that the next time you fly, no one will ever ask if you belong. They'll just welcome you on board." Zoe hugged her tightly, the moment simple, but filled with meaning. As Amara looked out across the city once more, she felt it, not just peace, but legacy. And with one final deep breath, she turned back to her desk, ready to keep flying forward. because justice hadn't just taken off that day. It had landed.